And we welcome you into another edition of the Line Country Kia Goon and Ironhead Show. We are goonless once again on a very hot and humid Thursday afternoon in the Valley of Happiness. Chris Bucanani kind enough to fill in for the Dear Goon. And Booch, we appreciate it. Lots to get into. We talked Tuesday that we'd talk some Eagles, Steelers, football, and looking ahead to the season that will be and how we anticipate that might play out. And always dicey, but always fun to do, and it's kind of what fans like to do at this time of the year. And especially dicey, well, maybe the same thing for the Eagles, but the Steelers, it seems like every season there is a game that you definitively chalk up as a W, will end up as an L at some point over the course of the season. And again, maybe this is true for most teams. I just know the Steelers every year seem to drop at least a game to a team that it's absolutely inexcusable and you just can't comprehend. It has often been the Raiders over the years. That is very true.
Like a wild amount. Did you see that stat that was rolling around last year? Like the Steelers' record against the Raiders.
Well, and the thing
the
is,
Raiders' record against the rest of the NFL over the same stretch. It's very weird. Like there's some weird '70s.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not as though it's been good Raiders teams. Unlike, by the way, this year's Raiders team, I think is going to be pretty good. But yeah, it's just weird. But there's been some other team, I mean, the Raiders certainly, but there's been other games that you just sit there and you just absolutely shake your head at how it can happen. And again, part of it is it's the NFL and anything truly can happen on any given Sunday, and that's one of the reasons the NFL remains a very big draw in the world of sports. But
I'm trying to find it here, Mike, since you brought it up.
Yeah.
My friend sent me an amazing stat line from an old Steelers-Texans game that I had totally forgotten about, but I will find it here, and I'll share. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so in December 8th, 2002, so this is pre-Roethlisberger.
Yeah.
The Texans defeated the Steelers 24-6, and here are the stats from that game. The Texans' offense had 47 total yards and 3 first downs. The Steelers' offense, which was led, I believe, by Tommy Maddox, had 422 total yards and 24 first downs. Final score was 24-6 Houston. The Texans' defense forced 5 turnovers and scored 3 touchdowns. So, poop happens, as they say.
Yep. Yes, it does.
Did the Steelers go to the playoffs that year? Was that the year that there was the Tommy Maddox versus Kelly Holcomb playoff game? 2002?
Yeah. Yep. Crazy times.
Yeah. Kelly Holcomb, still maybe the most successful quarterback in New Browns history.
Yep. I did see which I'm happy to see. I think we've talked about it before, but Kyler Murray got the big contract extension. I'm sure there's people that are questioning the money and whether or not he's worth it. We'll find out over the coming years. But
versus the alternative, that's the way you have to look at it.
Yes, and the other part is he is, from everything I know about him, and again, Bo Nickel and he were high school classmates, so Bo is good friends with him, and I think they've stayed. I know they stayed in touch throughout their collegiate careers. I presume that they have stayed in touch since, and so it's just one of those things. It's kind of the whatever it is, 7 degrees, 3 degrees of Kevin Bacon. It's kind of the 3 degrees of Kyler Murray here for yours truly. But it is cool to know somebody who knows the guy.
Sure.
And again, from all accounts, just is a really good person. And I think is one of the, when he's healthy, he's one of the more enjoyable guys to watch in the NFL, right? Like, I mean, he brings eyeballs to the set because of the way in which he plays. And again, I think good for him. We'll see again, how it plays out in terms of whether that was money well spent or not by the Cardinals. But I suspect at the end of the day it will be. I think he's a guy that is capable of leading a team to the Super Bowl. And as with all individuals, you've got to get the right help around you, and we'll see how that plays out. But I think they're in pretty good shape in Arizona when you look at the next 5 years or so for that organization. I think they're positioned pretty well to be, at the very least, in contention pretty consistently.
I'm with you. I think that's right.
So I will say, when we were talking Tuesday, I'm like, this is a time of year where you're optimistic, and I'm even thinking the Steelers could get to the playoffs. And then I sat down and really went through the schedule, and I will say I'm not sure that optimism is still there. I think there's a path there, and again, so much of it is going to depend on how the quarterback / offensive situation plays itself out.
Yeah.
And there's just so many obviously, starting with the starting quarterback and how well they play is the biggest variable, but how that offensive line hopefully continues to grow and come together. How the receiving core adjusts in the upcoming season. And, I think the defense is going to be solid. But solid in the NFL, it's a relative thing because, again, if you were going against a high-powered offense, no matter how good your defense is, you are going to give up points, and that's just the nature of the way the game is played these days.
Yeah, the problem for the Steelers in terms of can they be a playoff team is that they're in the AFC.
Yeah.
I mean, the NFC is not very rigorous comparatively, right? Like, I could definitely see a 9-8 team sneaking into the last wild card spot again this year. Hopefully that will not be the Eagles in 2022. But, I mean,
whereas a 10-win AFC team, I think is likely to be left out.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget now with an 18-game schedule.
Yeah.
You think 10 games, oh man, great. Maybe not so much, right? So like 10-7 in a conference with so many good teams and so many good quarterbacks. That's the big thing. There's so many good quarterbacks. Another reason, going back to your earlier point, why I think it was smart for Arizona to invest the money, because man, there isn't a lot of certainty at the quarterback position in the NFC. So if you invested a number 1 overall pick in a guy who has improved and gotten your team to the playoffs, or I don't know, has he gone to a playoff game or he's just missed it, right?
I think
maybe they did one. But the point is, you don't look at Kyler Murray and say, that guy's not going anywhere. This is a dead end.
Right.
Man, in the NFC, just stability can get you very, very far.
Yeah, I agreed. So just quickly running through the Steelers' schedule.
Okay,
and then we'll do the Eagles. But so the Steelers open up at Cincinnati, and I'm not going to tell you there's no chance for the Steelers to win that game. But I'm telling you, even as a diehard, optimistic Steelers fan, I am not expecting a W in that one.
How did they look against Cincy last year? I can't even remember.
Okay in the one game and not as good in the other. Burrow, Burrow to me is just the clear difference maker right now in that game. No matter who the starter is for Pittsburgh, Burrow with his resume and what he brings in this season is obviously far superior to what the Steelers will have at the quarterback spot. And I just think you start there. The fact that it's at Cincinnati is not welcome news if you're a Steelers fan. Now, it's an intra-conference game, so familiarity and all of that, and I do think that helps out. And I think the Steelers' defense will be well prepared, but again, well prepared and stopping Joe Burrow and that offense are two different things. And I expect Burrow to take another step this year. I know I was watching one of the numerous NFL countdown shows, and they were there was discussion about Joe Burrow and whether or not this might be a year where he takes a step back or what we expect. I just think that guy is going to keep getting better. He is a driven individual. I think much like Tom Brady, I think Joe Burrow is going to play his entire career and probably live the rest of his life with a chip on his shoulder. And more power to him. And but I think, like Brady, if he goes on and wins, 10 Super Bowls, I think he's still going to think about the fact that people didn't think he could be a starting quarterback at a big-time college football program, let alone be an NFL superstar. So I think that will always fuel Burrow, and I don't think he's a guy that's ever going to get complacent about the situation. And I just think he is such a good leader, such a good teammate. I mean, everything you read and hear about him is that those guys, everywhere he's been, galvanize around him. And I think that Bengals team is very well equipped to make at least a run toward another Super Bowl here in the upcoming season. So,
yeah, and I mean, the problem is you feel like Burrow could take a step forward, and overall the Bengals still might take a step back from having played in the Super Bowl.
Very true.
But is that playing their home opener with an unsettled quarterback situation in Pittsburgh? Even if all of those things were true, that is maybe enough to get the W there.
Yeah, I think
Maybe
it's a really
the Bengals anymore. I don't know.
Really tough draw for the Steelers. Again, I'm not going to sit here and be absolutely aghast and astonished that the Steelers win that game if they do, but it'll surprise me. I think Cincinnati will rightfully be a pretty strong favorite, and I just think, again, quarterback play being the difference in so many NFL games, the experience of last season, and then being home on opening day, I think is a big deal in the NFL. So
let me toss you.
I have that as a L. Yes,
and I'm agree with you. I think because we'll go by game by game. But I think the Steelers drop that opener. But then by the time they get through the first 5 weeks, I think they're at worst 3-2. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, I could agree with that scenario, but I also I can see this thing going off the rails quickly. And again, I tend to be an optimist, but I try to be realistic too. And I just think there's a couple of pivotal games, and the home opener for the Steelers to me is just such a pivotal game. Presuming they lose to the Bengals, and I am presuming that, they then host the Patriots. And I think this is a dangerous New England team. The fact that you're at Acrisure Stadium and the fans are going to be fired up to be in Acrisure Stadium is obviously going to be a big deal.
It just oozes football that name, doesn't it?
I mean, it
you
sure
can just
does.
hear John Facenda's voice in your head when you hear the name Acrisure Stadium.
Yes, indeed. But this game to me is one of I kind of have three games that I'm putting stars next to as games that could turn the season one way or the other. And this is at the top of that list because the issue is if you lose this game, and it is certainly not unthinkable that the Steelers could lose this game. I mean, it's the Patriots, it's Belichick. The Steelers' history with Belichick is not that great.
There was a stretch last season, and they were the hottest team in the AFC.
Yeah, and I think I really like Mac Jones. I really like the way that they are putting the pieces in around him. I don't think I think they're a year away from being where they want to be in terms of being strong Super Bowl contenders. Yeah. But again, is it going to shock you, anybody, that Bill Belichick arrives a year earlier than many are expecting? No. And this game, I think, is also one of those pivotal games for the Patriots, by the way, because, again, I think the Patriots could very well be not just a playoff team, but I think they could be a legit contender here in the AFC as well, if a couple of things come together the right way. But
well, they certainly no longer have the luxury of an automatic 6 wins in the division.
That is for sure. That is for big time.
Well, 5 wins. They lost to the Dolphins like every single year, it seems.
Which
the
was
Dolphins could be like 4-12.
also inexplicable.
One of their wins was in Miami versus New England.
So I am going to put this in the W column for the Steelers, but again, this one to me is a huge game because if the Steelers do go 0-2, you turn around and now the potential, right, for bickering in the locker room, and whether or not it comes out in the public, but whoever the quarterback is, that's you get off to an 0-2 start. That's when the whispers, hey, the other guy should be the starter,
right?
And it becomes a really it can become a really difficult situation. And then you have the short week and a Thursday night game at Cleveland. And again, I'd feel much better if this game was in Pittsburgh at the vaunted Acrisure Stadium. But the fact that you're going to Cleveland, I think is once again dangerous for the Steelers, and especially if they are 0-2 and you do have any acrimony in that locker room about how everything is being managed. So,
in all likelihood, the best case scenario for Cleveland there is that they are starting Jacoby Brissett. Did you see the quarterbacks they were working out today? I mean, like Josh Rosen and like some other clown. I mean, the way they have managed the quarterback room in Cleveland. I mean, there was only one.
It's
out
a
of
little
32
bizarre
NFL
to me.
franchises they could have done. Yeah,
I'm still at some point, and listen, I don't know how Baker Mayfield's career is going to play out. Obviously, nobody does with any certainty. But I will be
A.J. McCarron and Josh Rosen.
Gotcha. Yeah. I will be curious to see, like in 10 years, when they start doing some of the retrospectives on how everything played out in Cleveland, because it still is amazing to me how not just the fans, but the organization turned on Baker through injury. But it wasn't as though he just had an awful season, right? Like, there were clear explanations for it and very reasonable, understandable explanations. And you are a year removed from the biggest win, since at least the Super Bowl era, right, of that organization's history. I mean, at least in the Super Bowl era, that win over the Steelers in the playoffs was. I mean, what game would you say was big? I mean, I guess maybe
there's maybe one from like the '80s and the Bernie Kosar era,
maybe
whatever. But
it wasn't over the Steelers. I mean, I know they had other playoff wins, but that was
over their rival.
I don't know. I that whole thing is still just absolutely fascinating.
Jacoby Brissett. Chalk it up as a W.
So, well, I do have it as a W, but I have it as a worrisome W. And especially if the Steelers are 0-2 going into that game, I can see this really easily becoming 0-3 with that short week and going to Cleveland, where the fans will be, I think, a little excited.
I'm just going to go ahead and put you on the spot.
Yeah.
I'll ask you the question now. Your gut feeling, because this is going to be a big determinant in all of these questions.
Yeah.
Who's under center for Pittsburgh?
So I do think it is going to be Pickett. I think so too. I think they want to. I think they want to see what they have. They know what they have in Mason Rudolph, and it's not awful. And I think for short terms, it's very serviceable in today's NFL.
As your backup than A.J. McCarron or Josh Rosen.
I would agree with that 100%. No, I like Rudolph. But I don't think he is an NFL starting quarterback. No, and I think if he is your starter, that is worrisome. And listen, I don't think, I think if you're a Steelers fan, you're hoping this competition is close, right? You don't want this to be a situation where they're going with Mason Rudolph because he clear cut has won the job over Kenny Pickett, because that means that Pickett isn't what you were hoping he was going to be. It doesn't mean he couldn't develop into it, but it means that he's not it's a first-round pick. You're expecting a first-round pick in today's NFL to be contending for that starting job unless you have one of those 5 or 6 elite guys. Like, if the Packers are bringing in the guy that they think will succeed, Aaron Rodgers, yes, you're okay with him not winning the starting job that rookie season. But
so let me just throw this out there. Now, they're not totally comparable situations, but when Andy Reid got to Philadelphia, it was a bad team. That's the difference. The Steelers, with the money they've invested in their defense, they're not rebuilding. They got to be reloading. I think that's the feeling inside the building. Right?
Yes, for sure.
So Andy Reid drafts Donovan McNabb to be his franchise quarterback. He knew that team was going to stink. So he was the quarterback's coach in Green Bay, and he brought a young journeyman, Doug Peterson, along with him. And it was basically, here's the deal, Doug. You're never going to be a starter otherwise. You can start in Philadelphia. I am putting you out there to take the lumps. So my starter doesn't get his body and his spirit caved in by playing for this crappy team, and we're going to work him in. Is that Mitchell Trubisky for Kenny Pickett? I think the NFL has changed so much. The situation is different. These teams, from what I have observed, if you take a guy in the first round, they cannot resist putting that guy out there. If the competition is even close, the rookie gets the start. And that's why I'm with you. I think Pickett's the guy.
Yeah, and I think
but no thought that Trubisky's just going to be a Doug Peterson style bullet sponge to start the season.
It could be, but I think they're expecting this offensive line again. I don't think it's going to be one of the great offensive lines here for the Steelers, but I do think it is. I think the expectation within that room is that it's going to be solid. Like they're going to get good play, effective play out of that offensive line.
I saw somebody ask our buddy Ross Tucker about the Steelers' offensive line.
Yeah.
Woo! Man, I could feel the heat waves coming off my phone reading the tweets. He was dropping bombs.
Yeah.
I'm not impressed.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't think they're going to be a dominant group, but I think they're going to be better than they were. Well, which, again, I suppose you could say, well, yeah, okay. Penn State's offensive line is going to be better than it was for the sanction years too, and so what does that mean? Yeah, I mean, I do think, aside from the quarterback spot, that obviously is the biggest question, and maybe there is some thought, it would never be revealed publicly, but maybe internally when Mike Tomlin and the coaches are just in their rooms and discussing everything, it's like, hey, we got to give Kenny a chance, and this O-line isn't going to give him a chance. I mean, I don't know. I think this offensive line, again, it is not going to be a great offensive line, but my expectation is that it will be better. But listen, you're going against, say what you want about the Browns, they've got a very good defense.
Yes.
The Patriots have a very good defense. The Bengals have so those first 3 games, I mean, maybe you do put Trubisky out there and see how things are going. I don't think there's a feeling within the organization that they need to rush Pickett in there.
Sure.
But again, I think the hope is that you're at least seeing a competitive battle here. And to me, if it is competitive, I'm wanting to see what Pickett brings. Now, again, that's me as the fan and not having anything on the line in terms of my job at stake. Maybe they do at least roll Trubisky out there if it is a close competition for that first game and just see how he manages things, 1, and how the offensive line holds up, 2, and then start to play your cards from there. Again, depending on the results and everybody's feeling about how things are progressing at that point.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, all of the rookie quarterbacks from last draft started last season except for Trey Lance. And
Right.
I think Jimmy Garoppolo's better than Trubisky or Mason Rudolph. And also, I feel like the 49ers, and correctly, because, I mean, they were a couple plays away from going to the Super Bowl probably, they felt like they were maybe a little bit farther along the tracks than Pittsburgh is right now.
Oh, yes, I think, again, I think the Steelers are I think they are hoping as an organization, and I'm talking about like the ownership and Mike Tomlin. And listen, Tomlin, again, is never going to concede anything, and nor should he. He's a head coach, and you want to be out there competing every year. I think realistically, if you got truth serum in them, they'd say, listen, if we can get to the playoffs this year, get Kenny Pickett developed, like we know, we're a couple of years away from being legit contenders now in the AFC, maybe more than that. But I mean, I think their thinking right now is that they can get there in fairly short order if Pickett can become a franchise type quarterback. And so, again, I think the chance is there to get off to a 2-1 start. I also, again, will not be shocked if they're 0-3. I will be shocked if after those first 3 games this team is 3-0. That would shock me, because I think all 3 of those first 3 are games that they are capable of losing.
Yeah.
Losable, is that a word? And then, and I think 2 of them are really, really dangerous because of the quality of the opponent in the Bengals and the Patriots. And you never know if the Browns are somehow going to put it together, although it does not seem like this will be the season for that.
But no matter how those first 3 games go, good news in week 4.
Yes.
Good news, Steelers fans.
And listen, I do think the Jets are going to be a better team, but the Steelers at home with an extra couple of days.
You better watch out when Temple comes in.
Yes.
Oh, we're going to get licked. Those kids, they play.
They're a solid team. That was, I forget, what was the opponent that, Temple, and God rest his soul, and I were just absolutely tears coming down our cheeks laughing. One of the teams, and I think it was one of the Maxwells, but it might have even been like when they played Brown or something. And this was going back the heck of ways, but it was one of the teams that came in here, and it was one of those games that you knew. I mean, there was zero question as to who was going to win the game. And Paterno's talking about, no, they're a tough, gritty team. And then he said, you watch them, they break the huddle as crisply as anybody out there. He's like, you watch them. And so that whole game, Bullen and I think it might have been that Brown game, but Bullen and I, like every time, it's like, oh, that was a good huddle break. Break. But Paterno actually spent time in his press conference talking about the opposing teams'
submarine is alma mater. I mean, come on, you gotta find something
to break a huddle. It's like, okay, well now we're so I do think the Jets are going to break the huddle really, really well here in the upcoming season.
I'll grant you that. I think so.
And
it's in Pittsburgh. I mean,
yes, I will chalk that up as a W, and I'm chalking that up as a W no matter what, except, and this is where, like, that feels like that is a game that the Steelers could drop just because somewhere along the way they drop a game to some team.
Don't worry, they play the Raiders later this year, so you're fine. Although,
this is also
the Raiders
true.
aren't going to be bad.
So then they're at Buffalo. I think the Bills are going to have this game circled on their calendar.
Last year.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, do I think that it's impossible for the Steelers to go up there and win? No. And part of it, too, is all of this, we always are looking at this schedule and presuming everybody's healthy, which nobody for any of these teams is going to be healthy. So, like, if a Josh Allen is in the Bills lineup,
sure,
obviously that changes the complexion of everything. If Trubisky and or Pickett are out, who knows? But presuming we know what we think we know now, that feels like a loss at Buffalo.
It's hard to imagine, like you said, after last year. Into their building. I think that team's on a mission. Yeah, I think we're in a consensus 3-2 through 5
So the next game is the second of my starred games, where the Buccaneers come into Pittsburgh, and again, this will be coming off of the Bills game. However that plays out, but you figure the Steelers. Best case to me is that they are 3-2 and they're ticked off about the loss of the Bills, and they're coming back home and wanting to get the vibes going in a positive direction. I certainly think this is a winnable game. I also think it is a really, really tough and dangerous game, especially coming off of what is going to be a physical game I mean, I guess every NFL game is physical, so maybe that's stating the obvious. But I think, the chances of having some guys banged up going into that Tampa game are pretty strong. And that worries me as well. So that game, to me, very dangerous. Being the optimistic Steelers guy I am, I do have it penciled in as a W. But again, so I have the Steelers at 4-2, and I could easily see them 2-4 after those first 6 games, and that's obviously a huge difference.
I don't know, man. I think the wheels might start coming off Tampa a little bit this year.
Well, it is going to be interesting to see.
It sounds like Fournette weighs 4,000 pounds, and I have come to have a real grudging respect for Tom Brady, just as the relentless warrior.
Yeah.
Right? So if you would have told me, 7 years ago, that there would be a part of me like rooting for Tom Brady to somehow play 3 or 4 more years at the age of 43 or whatever he is, I'd be like, that's nuts. But how old is he, Tom Brady?
78 now, I think.
Yeah. So
now, what is he? I think he's 45, right?
45, yeah, I think that's right. But if you would have told me, I'd be kind of rooting for Tom Brady to play into his 80s, I'd be like, you're nuts. But I kind of am.
Yeah, I'm with you.
He was almost ready to hang him up last season. And, once a pro athlete gets to that point, sometimes even for the most enduring, the wall hits fast.
Yeah.
And so I just can see, some cracks in the foundation starting to show from Tampa. So, again, going on the road, playing the 1:00 game against Pittsburgh. Yeah. Quarterback played the huge X factor. I don't know how many more times I'm going to have to issue that disclaimer on the Steelers here. But, I could see that.
Well, then the next week, the Steelers are at the Dolphins. And I actually have this as an L. I think it's a winnable game for sure. But I just think there's
a huge subplot to that game.
Well, there's a couple of subplots to that game.
So hit me. So I'm thinking of Brian Flores going back and coaching.
And I think, but I don't know how that translates to players, though. I mean, I'm sure I'm sure there's going to be some sentiment that yes, we want to, we want this guy to
coaching the Dolphins. I would pick Miami, but that's because of the attitude he instilled in their defense.
Yeah.
Now they're trying to go with the flow, go follow the pack, and be more of an offensive-minded team. And I don't think there's I know they traded for Jalen Waddle. I'm not buying Miami's offense. Is what I'm saying.
I don't know. Yeah, but there's just so many questions about the Steelers' offense, and I just going on the road, down there, and the weather to me is a potential factor here, right? Like if it is a really humid night down in Miami, mid-October, you can kind of get just about anything. I mean, if it ends up being, in the 60s and Steelers are completely comfortable, then, I like their chances better than if it's, 80 degrees at night and it's still really humid and all of that. And Dolphins have been practicing it the previous couple of weeks and all of that. So, I don't know. I know Tottenham's record in primetime games is phenomenal, but on the road is a little different. And I just, again, you're trying to project how the seasons are going to be playing out for all of these teams and not actually knowing that. It's hard because I think this could be a chance for the Dolphins to have a statement game. And if they're off to a good start and at least, around 500 or above 500, then they're going to have some confidence that they're going to be playing, the Flores factor is there. I just don't know how much. I'm sure it will be talked about all week. I don't know how much it ultimately plays into either team.
I just see
thinking when they're actually out on the field.
But I just see it as it was totally baffling to me why Miami fired him. I just see that as a loss just on the field.
I agree with you there.
I think what he brought to that team is exactly the qualities they would need to win a game like this. So, man, like, I think do not follow the Dolphins closely, obviously, but I don't like Tua, but they clearly do. Like, they are looking for every opportunity to get that guy out of town. And so I look at it and I'm like, well, they see him in the building every single day. And if they have that level of discomfort with a guy they took like third overall, I gotta believe that there's something.
So I figure the Steelers are going to lose one. They're going to go 1-1 is my thinking between the Buccaneers and Dolphins, and so I have them winning at home and losing on the road. Yes, I have them 4-3 through the game with the Dolphins.
And we think probably 11 wins is where you start to feel pretty comfortable about the postseason bid?
Yeah, I think 11 probably gets you in
the AFC.
The AFC, yes. Not 100% sure that'll be the case this season, but feel pretty confident that is a possibility anyway. And then the Steelers go to the Eagles, and obviously it'll be a much talked about game. It'll be interesting to see where both teams are at that point of the season, but it has the potential to be one of those games that, again, I don't have it as one of my star games, but it certainly could be. Again, depending on how both teams' seasons are playing out to that point. And it's another one of those games that I can see going either way right now as you look at it. There are just so many variables to me that the fact that you're on the road is concerning as a Steelers fan. And the fact that you will be coming off of that trip and a night game at Miami, so a little shorter week of practice, concerns me when you're talking about a game that is, again, going to receive a lot of hype, even if both teams are already presumed out of the playoffs, which is possible at that stage of the season. I don't think it'll happen, but it's possible. So I actually,
the Eagles could be 0-7 and not out of the playoff, not out of the division title race at that point in the season. Okay,
that is true. So being the ever optimistic Steelers fan, I do have it penciled in as a Steelers W, but it's another one that I will not be the least bit surprised. So I have the Steelers at 5-3, and I could see the Steelers at 2-6.
Now I'm not saying this because I am an Eagles fan.
Yeah,
I got the Eagles winning that game. And this is Mike the Mailman, trends to treasure. I forget how many times it's been, but every single time this century that Pittsburgh and Philadelphia have played in the NFL, the home team is won. So it's in Philly, I'm taking the Birds.
There you go.
It's in Pittsburgh, I take the Steelers.
Perfect.
Until the trend is broken, I'm just riding it.
I'm not as reasonable as anything else anybody's going to say in these preseason predictions.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Then
we're talking about like whether it's going to be humid in Miami.
Exactly. Then the Steelers are home with the Saints, but they have the bye week in between, which is the reason I'm taking the Steelers over the Saints.
Eagles fans are going to be cursing you 2 weeks prior.
Yeah,
rooting you on.
I don't think
we got the Saints first round pick, baby.
I don't think I'd be taking the Steelers if not for the 2 weeks to prepare.
Sure.
But I do think it is really difficult to go on the road and beat a team, looking at this from New Orleans' perspective. Again, wouldn't be shocking. I think it's really probably a toss-up game as you look at it here in the preseason. But at home, I'll take the Steelers with the 2 weeks to get ready for the Saints. Then the Steelers are home, Sunday night game against the Bengals. Crowd will be going crazy. I just have a tough time seeing the Steelers beating Joe Burrow right now with whoever's playing quarterback and however well, hopefully they're playing. I still think the Bengals are going to have the Steelers number in this season.
Okay, good. We're aligned again now because I got the Eagles winning the matchup with Philly or losing. I have the Eagles winning and you have the Steelers winning. This is the game where I think the Mike Tomlin prime time factor comes into play.
And that is why I really,
Pittsburgh.
I went back and forth on this one a good bit, to be honest with you. And there is something. I mean, it's kind of like the whiteout thing with Penn State.
100%.
There is something about those Sunday, Monday night games in particular, and Thursday night, I guess too, but especially the Sunday, Monday night games in Pittsburgh. For whatever reason, it does seem like that team, much more often than not. Well, it doesn't seem it. They do pull out those games. So
if you're an NFL player, you've grown up watching football, right? So you know the sport. So that's in your head.
yeah,
And when it is late on a Sunday or Monday night, you're in the fourth quarter.
yeah.
You know the history. And all of a sudden, that place is going nuts. And everywhere you look, there's the terrible towels swirling around. And there are all these people who absolutely hate your guts, just pouring that negative energy down on you. And you look across and you see those black and gold uniforms. There's no doubt in my mind that is a real psychological factor that works in the Steelers' favor and against whoever the visitor is.
Yeah.
And every time it works out for Pittsburgh, it's a force multiplier, and it just gets stronger.
And I do
stronger.
think it's one of those things, if the Steelers can keep it close, which they tend to do going into the fourth quarter, right, then you do kind of – that defense does seem to get another gear. Again, I'm taking the Bengals in it. Certainly will not be surprised if the Steelers win it, but I think the Bengals are going to be the team to beat in the AFC North this year, and are obviously one of the teams that I'm expecting to contend for a Super Bowl berth from the AFC again this year. Then the Steelers are at the Colts. That's the Monday night game the following week, and I have the Steelers winning that one, even though, again, I could easily make the argument either way. I think the Steelers will be ready to go for another primetime affair, and I think their defense can be a difference maker in that one. Then the Steelers go to the Atlanta Falcons. Yeah, they are very popular TV draw.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty usual, right?
Yes.
You get a number of primetime games. It's just, as you look at it, you're like, oh, wow. I mean, and back to back like that, too.
So now this is another one where – so the Steelers go to the Falcons then on December 4th. And I think on paper at the start of the season, right, the Steelers, like even on the road, this should be a win. This feels like a game that the Steelers, especially if they are 7-4, which is what I have them going into that game, this just feels like a game that they would trip up on. One of these next three for sure, and probably two of these three. So they're at
Arnold Ebiketie has a big hit on Kenny Pickett.
Yeah,
a fumble.
They're at the Falcons. I'm penciling it in as a W. And some of this is
I can't pick them up lose to the Falcons.
Some of these I pencil in one way, and then I kind of hedge my bets with the following week because I'm like, just like the Buccaneers Dolphins. Like I think they go 1-1 through those two games. I'm not overly confident about which one they win or lose, and I'm not overly confident that 1-1's what they'll be. Again, 2-0 or 0-2 wouldn't be terribly surprising. But I have the Steelers going into Atlanta and beating the Falcons. Then they come back home, and this again is where now that you can see the Steelers getting on a roll. The optimistic me is saying, yep, this is where they can roll it up, and you beat the Ravens at home. You get the big rivalry win, and now you're, what would they be, 9-4 and feeling really good heading into a trip to Carolina to take on the Panthers. I do love what Matt Rule is doing. I know there's a lot of folks that are questioning some of that. I think that guy is – Carolina's not going to be there this year. I think they are building for some really good things. I really do. I think he has a really good feel for the players down there, and I think over the next couple of years they emerge as a contender. But I have the Steelers winning that, especially getting on the run that we're talking about here previously. And then we come to the next of my star games because it's the Raiders. It's in Pittsburgh. Potentially.
But not the crappy Raiders, at least.
Yes.
Like this, I don't know how well they're going to do in that division, which is brutal. The AFC
it is
brutal, but this is a talented team. There's no question.
Really talented team. And I think it's going to be one of those games. It's a Saturday night game. Christmas Eve matchup, so the fans are going to be again revved up in Pittsburgh, and everybody's going to be saying the Steelers, if this plays out, which it obviously won't do, but if it plays out the way I'm predicting ahead of time, the Steelers will have won whatever it is, 5 in a row at that point. So everybody, all right, and regardless, even if the Raiders, even more so if the Raiders have won a bunch in a row, and I don't know what their schedule is like coming into it, but anyways, it has the potential to be one of those must-watch games and everybody all revved up, and it just feels like that's a game. And yes, it may not be. The Steelers could be 4-10 as well. As I said, I'm not overly confident about the W's I'm giving the Steelers. And if that's the case, and the Raiders are in playoff contention, I think the Raiders could absolutely roll them in Pittsburgh. But if this thing plays out. I am taking the Raiders just because I just feel like
that record they got against Pittsburgh is crazy.
Well, I just go back to quarterback play, and this is going to be, and I realize you're going to say, well, it's the NFL, and at this stage of the season, if it is Kenny Pickett, which I think by this point, regardless of how it plays out early, I do think at this stage of the season, Kenny Pickett will be the quarterback by this point.
Yeah.
And if I'm right about that, and all kinds of ifs in all of these equations. But it is going to be Christmas Eve in Pittsburgh, where Pickett is going to be, if they're on this roll and he is the quarterback, like the hype. This just feels like a game that is set up for a disappointment.
Well, let me hit you with this.
For all of the reasons we've talked about.
Listen to this, man. Now, you reasonably plotted out a 5-game winning streak for the Steelers heading into that Christmas Eve game in Pittsburgh against the Raiders.
Yeah.
Listen to Las Vegas's 5 games leading up to this.
Okay.
Listen to this stretch. They play at Denver with Russell Wilson now. At Seattle. They host the Chargers. Then they're at the Rams. Then they host the Patriots.
So they host the Patriots the week before. Coming to Pittsburgh.
Yeah. That is a rough 5-game stretch. Seattle, pending figuring out their quarterback spot, is probably not going to be that great. But other than that, man.
But it's there, and that's
good.
Always, I don't know.
Yeah, right. You got to play in front of the 12s. You got to play in Denver against Russell Wilson. You got to play in front of the 12 men. Then you got to host the Chargers, who are going to be very good. Then you got to go to the Rams.
Yep.
And then have New England the week before. I don't know.
So the Steelers then are at Baltimore for the penultimate game of the regular season. And at Baltimore, I don't have a good feeling about that one either.
Yeah, that's rough.
So I have that as an L. And then you have Cleveland at home, and you'd like to presume a W there, which would get them to the playoffs with an 11-6 record. I will say, I am
Deshaun Watson.
Yes, very, very possible. Which, and again, it's fun to do this. It's just that there are going to be significant injuries both to the Steelers and opponents throughout the course of the season. And so much of the NFL, and I think it's just every year, I think it's an under reported or talked about situation, which, if a starting quarterback goes out for 3 weeks and you catch that team in one of those 3 weeks and you get the W, like that's mean, it's a good win. And
Yep.
again, I mean, wins and losses are wins and losses. That's the way that the NFL and all of these leagues work, but especially the NFL. But there really is so much luck involved in terms of, and even just timing. As you talked about, I mean, the Patriots got on that roll last year. Well, if you played them before they got on that roll, or versus you played them when they seemingly had everything figured out and going. You know, when you play, I mean, the Steelers beat the Bills at the right time of the year.
Right.
The Steelers were not going to, if that game was played a month later.
Sure. Yeah, no
not
question.
And
It's a season opener, right?
yeah, and there's just so many things that go into, and that's why, that season opening game for the Steelers this year with the Bengals, again, maybe the Bengals get too caught up in I mean, they're going to be celebrating, obviously, like crazy before that game, the AFC Championship, and the fans are going to be revved up, the players are going to be revved up, and sometimes, right, it can take the energy out of you. I mean, I think they'll come out like a ball of fire, but maybe by the time the fourth quarter rolls around, it's like, holy cow. I feel like we've already played 6 quarters because you get so hyped up. And so, and managing all that stuff is always, I think, a little more difficult than what we, the fans, assume it is. Not to tie everything back to wrestling, but David Taylor, the first time he wrestled Kyle Dake, well, I guess the only time he wrestled for the national title, David got out of his routine, which, I mean, he was strict about, but he was overly hyped and excited. And if you watch the third period of that bout, it was not the David Taylor we came to expect. And it's not because he suddenly lost his conditioning. It was that he used up too much energy. And I'm not, all props to Kyle Dake. I'm not meaning this to sound as though Dake didn't deserve the win. This is a big part of it. You got to know how to manage everything that goes into a championship situation. That's part of, right? I mean, all of these teams that you get to the Super Bowl, how you manage that week leading up, the night before, the pregame routine. I mean, that is all part of who ultimately gets to win the championship is knowing how to navigate and, figure all of that stuff out. But I think David just got himself so worked up ahead of time, and the adrenaline was pumping so high at the start of it that he didn't have what he normally has in the gas tank at the end. And I think there is the potential for that with the Bengals in that season opener for sure, because again that stadium is going to be wanting and ready to celebrate, and I think the players are going to be loving that, as well as the opportunity to take on a rival. And I do think there is a chance, right, that they just get overly hyped at the start, and then that fourth quarter rolls around, and it's a little harder to draw on the reserves of energy that would normally be there because of everything you expended in the pregame. That's
you and I have talked about
the optimistic Steelers fan.
Yeah, we've talked a lot over the years about my feeling that the post-Super Bowl loss hangover that carries into the following season is a real thing. The two sports cliches that I believe are real are that and the sophomore slump in college. I think that there are actual real factors that absolutely do come into play. You play later into the year. You have your locker room is starting to get eaten up by two things. Other teams trying to harvest your talent because they want to get Super Bowl credibility in their locker room. And all the things that come along with winning the Super Bowl, except on a smaller scale, guys worried about their endorsement deals and more money coming in, and all of a sudden the expectations inside and outside the building start to change. I think all of those factors wear a team down.
Yeah, and I think it is going to be interesting too this year. On the other side of the coin, from the outside looking in, you say, 17 games, okay, you add another game. Well, managing the 17-game schedule as a coach, again, in an absolutely brutal physical sport, I think that is a big deal. I mean, managing the 16-game schedule was a big deal. And you saw some coaches and teams do it much better than others. And again, it's, we've seen teams get off to great starts and have a great first couple of months and then fade late, and vice versa. And it's trying to what we always talked about was that what you want to do at the start of the season, what you're really hoping to do is put together, when it was a 16-game schedule, 2 3-1 quarters and 2 2-2 quarters. And if you did that, that got you to 10-6. And right, that sounds manageable for any team. I mean, I don't care how bad you are. It's like, well, no, but we're saying go 3-1 over 2 4-game stretches, and then just 500 the rest of the way.
Yeah.
And that's likely, most seasons, that's going to get you. And again, much easier said than done when you're playing the other teams in the NFL. But again, on paper, it's we don't have to go on any kind of a crazy tear. 3-1 a couple of times, 2-2 a couple of times. Boom, you're there. That's all it is.
Good way to think about it. Yeah.
And now I think you need another win there in the AFC this year. I suspect you're going to need another win then in that extra game. But managing that schedule with the extra game, I do think in terms of keeping everybody's legs fresh and the mental approach fresh for the teams that are kind of trying to grind it out and get there to the finish line over that last 4 or 5 game stretch. It's a big deal. And I do think the fact that the Steelers have a more veteran coaching staff plays in the Steelers' favor in that regard. I do think, though, that stretch run is formidable. Those final 3 games, again, depending on how the Browns are and how the Steelers are playing it to that point, but it'll be an interesting final 3 games. Hopefully, it'll be an interesting final 3 games if the Steelers are at least in contention in the AFC.
A phrase that will always make me laugh, depending on how the Browns are playing.
I'm telling you, one of these years, that organization is going to put it together. Not this year, but one of these years, it is actually going to happen.
I really don't know, man. Like, how
I know,
working
but
out A.J. McCarron and Josh Rosen after you just gave the biggest quarterback contract in NFL history? I'm gonna owe me the Browns. Truly, I mean, it's a skill. It's a skill.
All right, we'll talk Eagles on Tuesday.
Maroon.
How's that sound?
Yes, absolutely.
Break down the Eagles, and also maybe just take a quick look at the NFL as a whole, because I do think, and we probably say this every season, but I do think this has a chance to be one of the, for just the average fan, not take your team out of it. I think this is going to be a super fun season in the National Football League. I really do. There's a ton of stars. You have the Tom Brady, the oldest of the old stars, but you have an influx of guys that fans are excited to see what they can do at this next level. You have a lot of guys who are coming off really good first or second seasons, including a guy like Joe Burrow, where it's like, man, can this guy take it to the next level? Might we be watching the next Tom Brady in the making in terms of a guy who's seemingly in the Super Bowl every other year type of thing, and how the Chargers continue to progress. The AFC in particular, because I still think the Bills are going to get there, and I am picking the Bills to win the Super Bowl in the upcoming season, but I did that last year, so that's not a terrible shot.
Sorry, Buffalo fans.
And yes, sorry. I know it's a god-awful thing I'm doing to Josh.
I tried to stop him.
Yes.
It's still time for us to change his mind.
I should change it just because I really do want them to as well. I'll be rooting for them if the Steelers can't win it. And I don't think the Steelers can in the upcoming season.
I will tell you,
but I do think there's just a lot of really neat storylines.
Miraculous coaching jobs if the Steelers win the Super Bowl this year.
Yes.
I mean,
if the Steelers,
I don't think they're an untalented team, but my God,
if the Steelers get to the second round of the AFC playoffs, it'll be one of the all-time. I mean, getting to the playoffs would be pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I'll
in and of itself. Yeah. I mean, I'm really not. Even though I end up predicting it here, a less confident prediction you will never hear.
He's already walking it back.
Yes.
So there's hope for you, Buffalo fans.
Never I've never been less confident about one of my predictions. Put it that way. All right, we'll be back on Tuesday. We hope you have a great weekend. Until Tuesday,